The crystal towers of Lumina Prime had stood for 10,000 years, their blue light painting the sky in gentle waves. Now they cracked and fell like broken glass under the metal claws of the machines. Kethara pressed her crystalline hand against the window of the communication center. Her people were dying. The beautiful spires that had been her world's pride lay in rubble. The singing crystals that powered their cities went silent one by one as the devourers tore them from the ground. The machines had come from the void 3 months ago. They called themselves devourers, and they lived up to their name. They consumed everything. Metal, stone, crystal, and flesh. It all became fuel for their endless hunger. Their ships blocked out the sun, and their spider-like robots crawled across the planet's surface like a plague. "Send the message again," Kethara told her aide, Molech. Her voice carried the harmonic overtones of her people, but now it cracked with desperation. Molech's crystal body flickered with nervous energy. "Ambassador, we have sent it 57 times. The response is always the same." "Then send it 58 times, Kethara snapped. She had never spoken harshly before the invasion. Her people were peaceful by nature. They created art from light and music from crystal resonance. They had never known war until the Devourers came. The message went out across the galaxy through quantum channels. It was simple and desperate. This is Ambassador Kethara of the Zephyrian Republic on Lumina Prime. Our world is under attack by the machine race known as Devourers. They are consuming our planet and killing our people. We have perhaps weeks before total extinction. We beg any civilized species for military aid. We offer all our technology, our resources, our eternal friendship to anyone who will help us survive." The first response had come from the Altarian Empire within hours. Kethara had felt hope surge through her crystal heart when she saw their golden seal appear on her screen. The Altarians were warriors, proud and strong. Surely they would help. "The Altarian Empire acknowledges your distress," the message read. "However, we have trade agreements with several worlds in Devourer-controlled space. Military action would jeopardize these profitable relationships. We suggest you evacuate your population. We wish you well in your future endeavors." Future endeavors. As if her people had a future without their home world. The Vorthak Collective responded next. The ancient slug-like beings were known for their wisdom and long view of galactic politics. The collective has observed similar situations throughout history, their message stated. Interference often prolongs suffering rather than ending it. Natural selection applies to civilizations as well as individuals. We will remember your species fondly. Remember them fondly, while they died. The Nexari Federation's response was the most insulting. These mechanical beings, who should have understood the threat of the Devourers better than anyone, simply said, "Error. No strategic value detected in requested action. Probability of success 0.003%. Resource allocation denied." One by one, every major power in the galaxy rejected their plea. The Helian Republic cited their non-interference policy. The Crystalline Consortium worried about economic disruption. The Void Runners claimed they were busy with other matters. Even species that the Zephyrians had helped in the past turned them away. The Gorthan refugees that Lumina Prime had sheltered for 50 years sent regrets but no ships. The Melody, whose entire civilization the Zephyrians had saved from a plague, offered only their thoughts and prayers. The Galactic Council's final response came on the 3rd day of desperate broadcasting. The official seal appeared on Kethara's screen, and for a moment, she dared to hope. "The Galactic Council has reviewed the situation on Lumina Prime," the message began. "While we sympathize with the Zephyrian people's plight, Council regulations prevent intervention in local conflicts. The Devourer presence appears to be an isolated incident, focused on resource acquisition rather than expansionist aggression. Therefore, this matter falls outside Council jurisdiction. We recommend immediate evacuation of all Zephyrian civilians to preserve as many lives as possible. This decision is final." Kethara stared at the message until the words blurred. Local conflict. Isolated incident. As if the extinction of her entire species was just a minor inconvenience to the galaxy. "Ambassador," Molech said softly, "the evacuation ships are ready. We can save perhaps 10% of our population before the Devourers reach the capital." 10%. 9 out of every 10 Zephyrians would die on this world that had been their home for millennia. The crystal caves where their ancestors had first learned to sing with the stones would be stripped bare. The harmonic libraries containing their entire cultural history would be consumed and processed into fuel. Outside the window, another tower fell. The impact shook the building, and hairline cracks appeared in the crystal walls. The devourers were getting closer to the capital. Soon, even the communication center would be overrun. Cathara prepared to send the final message, the one calling for evacuation, admitting defeat. Her people would become refugees scattered across the galaxy, slowly forgetting their songs and their crystal craft until nothing remained of the Zephyrian civilization except memories. But as her hand moved toward the transmission control, a new signal came through the quantum channel. The identifier was strange, not from any of the major galactic powers. The system designation read Sol 3 Terra, Earth, coordinates that matched no known civilization in the galactic databases. The message was brief and came with a simple audio attachment. This is Admiral Sarah Chen of the United Earth Defense Fleet. We received your call for help. Our fleet is already moving toward your position. We're not the biggest or the strongest, but we're coming anyway. Tell your people to hold on. Help is on the way. Cathara stared at the message in confusion. Earth? She ran a quick search through the galactic databases. The entry was minimal. Pre-contact civilization, technology level 2, space travel capability limited to local system, no diplomatic relations established. Primitives. A species that hadn't even achieved faster-than-light travel was claiming they would cross interstellar space to help. It had to be some kind of mistake or cruel joke. But then the attachment played and she heard something that made her crystal body resonate with an emotion she had almost forgotten. Hope. It was music. Not the complex harmonies of Zephyrian crystal song, but something raw and powerful. Voices raised together in defiance of the dark. The words were in a language she didn't recognize, but she felt their meaning in her soul. We shall overcome. Molech, she whispered. Delay the evacuation order. Her aide's crystals flashed with surprise. Ambassador, we cannot delay. Every hour costs lives. One day, Cathara said, her voice growing stronger. Give me one day to see if these humans are real. She didn't know why she believed. Logic said it was impossible. A primitive species couldn't cross the galaxy in time to help even if they wanted to. But something in that simple message, in that defiant song, made her crystal heart sing with the first hope she had felt since the invasion began. Outside, the devourers continued their advance. But for the first time in months, Cathara looked up at the star-filled sky and wondered if someone out there truly cared whether her people lived or died. The human fleet looked like nothing the galaxy had ever seen before. Admiral Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of the UES Defiance, watching the stars streak past through the viewport. Around her ship, 46 other vessels maintained formation. Destroyers, frigates, cruisers, and converted cargo ships that had been hastily fitted with weapons. The entire space-capable military force of Earth flew toward a world most humans had never heard of. Ma'am, Lieutenant Commander Jackson said from his station, we're getting signals from other ships in the area. Looks like the major powers are watching us, Sarah nodded. She had expected this. Word traveled fast in space, especially when a supposedly primitive species suddenly showed up with faster-than-light capability. The first message came from the Altarian Empire. The golden-skinned humanoids appeared on screen with their typical arrogant bearing. Unknown vessels, you are entering contested space. Identify yourselves immediately. Sarah activated the response channel. This is Admiral Chen of the United Earth Defense Fleet. We're responding to a distress call from Lumina Prime. The Altarian commander's expression shifted from arrogance to confusion. Earth, we have no record of your species in our databases. Your technology appears crude. Why are you interfering in this situation? Because someone asked for help, Sarah said simply. The Altarian laughed, a sound like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. You cannot seriously intend to fight the Devourers with those ships. Our military analysts estimate you have perhaps a 0.1% chance of success. Then we'll make the most of that 0.1%, Sarah replied, and cut the transmission. More messages followed. The Vorthak Collective sent warnings about the folly of youth. The Nexari Federation transmitted detailed probability calculations showing why human intervention would fail. The Crystalline Consortium offered to buy salvage rights to the human ships in advance. Each message carried the same undertone: amusement. The galaxy's powers found humanity's gesture touching, but pointless. Some even placed bets on how long the human fleet would last against the Devourers. Dr. Elizabeth Hawkins, the expedition's xenobiologist, joined Sarah on the bridge as they approached the Lumina system. "Admiral, I've been studying the Zephyrian communications. They're not just desperate, they're terrified. Their entire culture is built on harmony and peace. They've never faced anything like this." Sarah studied the tactical displays. The Devourer fleet was massive, over 300 ships of various sizes, all focused on stripping Lumina Prime bare. Her 47 vessels looked pathetic by comparison. "What's our advantage, Doctor?" Hawkins looked puzzled. "Advantage? Ma'am, we don't have any advantages. They outnumber us 7-1. Their technology is superior. Their ships are bigger and better armed." "There has to be something," Sarah insisted. "We didn't come this far to lose." Commander Torres from the UES Valiant joined the conversation via comlink. "Admiral, maybe our advantage is that we're crazy enough to be here at all. Every other species in the galaxy ran from this fight." Sarah smiled grimly. "Maybe that's it. Maybe our advantage is that we're here." The fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Lumina system. The sight that greeted them was horrifying. The beautiful crystal world that Zephyrian broadcasts had shown was now scarred with massive strip mining operations. Devourer harvester ships, each the size of a city, floated above the planet's surface while smaller craft ferried resources to processing stations. "My God," whispered Dr. Hawkins. "They're eating the planet." A transmission came through from Lumina Prime. The crystalline face of Ambassador Keithara appeared on screen, her features crackling with desperate hope. "Human fleet, this is Ambassador Keithara. You came, you actually came." "We said we would," Sarah replied. "What's your situation?" "Desperate. We have perhaps 48 hours before the Devourers reach our capital. Our defense forces are scattered and demoralized. We've evacuated most civilians to the deep caverns, but—" Her voice trailed off. "But you can't hold much longer," Sarah finished. "Understood. We're moving to engage." Kithara's image flickered with surprise. "Admiral, you have perhaps 50 ships. The Devourers have hundreds. This is suicide." "Maybe," Sarah admitted, "but it's better than letting your people die alone." The human fleet spread out as it approached the planet. Sarah had studied every piece of intelligence they could gather about Devourer tactics during the journey. The machines were efficient and logical. They used overwhelming force applied systematically. They had defeated dozens of technologically superior foes through pure numerical advantage and tactical precision. But Sarah had noticed something in the battle records. The Devourers always fought the same way. Their tactics never varied. They relied on their opponents being predictable, following standard galactic military doctrine. "All ships," she broadcast on the fleet channel, "remember the plan. We're not trying to win a traditional engagement. We're trying to buy time and cause as much chaos as possible." The first Devourer response came quickly. 20 ships detached from the harvesting operation and moved to intercept the human fleet. They were sleek, dark vessels that moved with mechanical precision. "Standard formation, standard approach," reported Commander Torres. "Just like the tactical files predicted." "Perfect," Sarah said. "Execute Plan Alpha." What happened next made military history, though few would understand it at the time. Instead of meeting the Devourer force head-on, the human ships scattered in all directions. Some dove toward the planet's surface. Others swung wide around the system's outer moons. A few turned directly toward the massive harvester ships. The Devourer formation paused, clearly processing this unexpected behavior. Their tactical computers had no protocols for enemies, that fled in random directions while broadcasting old Earth songs at maximum volume. The UES Defiance and 5 other ships punched through the confused Devourer line and headed straight for the largest harvester. The massive ship's defensive batteries swiveled to track them, but the human vessels were small and fast, weaving between the energy beams like insects avoiding a fly swatter. "Ma'am," Jackson called out, "the harvester is launching fighters." "Good," Sarah said. "Lieutenant Patel, prepare the surprise package." The surprise package was something no alien species had ever seen before. A human invention born from centuries of warfare against other humans. As the Devourer fighters closed in, expecting conventional weapons, the human ship suddenly released clouds of tiny projectiles. Chaff. flares, electronic countermeasures designed to confuse targeting systems. But more than that, debris, actual garbage fired from makeshift launchers, old satellite parts, scrap metal, even kitchen utensils from the ship's galley. The Devourer fighters, programmed to track and destroy sophisticated weapons, suddenly found their sensors overwhelmed by thousands of random objects. Their precision targeting systems couldn't distinguish between a missile and a floating wrench. In the confusion, the human ships closed to point-blank range and opened fire with everything they had. Kinetic weapons, nuclear missiles, and plasma cannons designed to punch through armor plating. The Harvester's shields flared and collapsed. Explosions rippled across its hull as critical systems went offline. Across the system, similar scenes played out as human ships used tactics no galactic military had ever conceived. They rammed damaged vessels into enemy formations. They used their own wreckage as weapons. When their missiles ran out, they fired construction equipment and medical supplies, anything that might damage or confuse the enemy. The Devourer fleet, programmed for efficiency and logic, found itself fighting an enemy that seemed to operate on pure chaos and spite. For the first time in their recorded history, the Devourers retreated from a smaller force. But Sarah knew this was just the beginning. They had bought time, nothing more. The real fight would be on the planet's surface, in the crystal caverns where the Zephyrian people were making their last stand. All ships, she broadcast, prepare for planetary assault. We're going down. The crystal caverns beneath Lumina Prime had never echoed with the sound of war. For 10,000 years, these tunnels had resonated with Zephyrian crystal song and the gentle hum of their harmonic technologies. Now they shook with explosions and the mechanical screeching of Devourer machines as they tore through the underground passages. Commander Vexil crouched behind a fallen crystal formation, his body's natural glow dimmed to avoid attracting enemy sensors. Around him, the remnants of the Zephyrian Defense Force waited for orders that seemed impossible to give. "Sir," whispered Lieutenant Zephana, "the humans are requesting a meeting. Their admiral wants to coordinate ground operations." Vexil felt his crystal structure resonate with frustration. The humans had performed miracles in space, somehow driving off the Devourer fleet long enough for the surface evacuations to continue. But what could primitive aliens possibly know about fighting in the sacred caverns? The meeting took place in what had once been a crystal garden, a place where young Zephyrians came to learn the songs that made the stones sing. Now it was a makeshift command center filled with wounded soldiers and flickering emergency lights. Admiral Chen arrived with 2 other humans, their strange cloth uniforms torn and dirty from the rapid descent to the planet. They carried primitive kinetic weapons and had painted dark colors on their faces in patterns Vexil didn't understand. "Commander," Admiral Chen said, inclining her head respectfully, "thank you for agreeing to this meeting." Vexil studied the small human female. She was perhaps half his height, with soft flesh instead of crystal armor and tiny eyes that held no bioluminescence, yet something in her bearing commanded respect. "Admiral Chen," he replied formally, "we are grateful for your assistance in space. However, the situation underground is complicated. These caverns are sacred to our people. They contain our most precious cultural artifacts and thousands of civilian refugees. Any military action must be carefully planned to avoid damaging what remains of our heritage." One of the other humans, a scarred male with the bearing of a veteran soldier, stepped forward. "Ma'am, if I may." At Chen's nod, he continued, "Commander, I'm Sergeant Major Williams. I've been studying your tunnel layouts while we were dropping. With respect, sir, your defensive positions are all wrong." Vexil's crystal body flared with indignation. "Wrong? These positions have been selected according to optimal tactical doctrine. We control the key intersections and maintain clear lines of retreat." Williams shook his head. "Sir, you're fighting like this is a conventional war between civilized species. The Devourers aren't civilized. They're machines that want to consume everything. You can't fight them with conventional tactics." "Then what do you propose?" Vexil asked, though his tone suggested he expected nothing useful from these primitives. Admiral Chen activated a holographic projector, crude by Zephyrian standards but functional. It displayed a 3-dimensional map of the cavern system. "We propose guerrilla warfare," she said simply. The Zephyrian officers present gasped. Some stepped backward as if Chen had suggested something obscene. "Guerrilla warfare?" Vexel repeated, his voice resonating with horror. Admiral, we are a civilized species. We do not hide in shadows and strike from ambush like barbarians. Sergeant Major Williams grinned, showing his teeth, a gesture that seemed predatory to the Zephyrians. Commander, with all due respect, civilization is a luxury you can't afford right now. Your enemy doesn't care about honor or proper military conduct. They just want to eat your planet and everyone on it. Lieutenant Zafana spoke up hesitantly. Sir, perhaps we should listen. The humans did drive away the Devourer fleet. Chen pulled up tactical displays showing Devourer movement patterns. Look at how they advance. Perfect formations, predictable sweep patterns, systematic grid searches. They're programmed for efficiency against conventional opposition. She switched to a different view showing the complex maze of crystal tunnels that honeycombed the planet's crust. But these caverns aren't conventional terrain. There are thousands of passages, multiple levels, hidden chambers that your people have been using for millennia. The Devourer's size and systematic approach become disadvantages down here. William stepped closer to the hologram. We hit them where they don't expect it, then disappear before they can respond. We use booby traps, ambushes, and psychological warfare. Make them afraid of every shadow and every sound. Psychological warfare against machines? Another Zephyrian officer asked skeptically. Even machine intelligences can experience something like fear, Admiral Chen explained. When their tactical models keep failing, when they start taking losses they can't predict or prevent, their behavior patterns change. They become cautious, inefficient. That's when we've won. Vexel struggled with the concept. Everything the humans suggested went against millennia of Zephyrian military tradition. His people were crystal singers and light weavers, not tunnel rats and saboteurs. But as if summoned by his doubts, an explosion echoed through the caverns. The Devourers were getting closer, and conventional tactics had already failed. What would you need from us? He asked quietly. Admiral Chen smiled, the first genuine warmth he'd seen from any human. Your knowledge of these tunnels, your crystal technology adapted for combat use, and your willingness to trust us when we ask you to do things that seem crazy. The next few hours transformed the crystal caverns into something unprecedented. Human Marines worked alongside Zephyrian soldiers to prepare ambush sites. The aliens shared their knowledge of hidden passages and forgotten chambers, while the humans demonstrated improvised weapons and explosive devices that made Zephyrian crystals ring with alarm. Sergeant Major Williams taught a group of young Zephyrians how to rig crystal formations to collapse on command. The aliens were horrified at first. The crystals were living things to them, partners in their harmonic songs. But they learned, because the alternative was extinction. Dr. Elizabeth Hawkins worked with Zephyrian technicians to modify their energy weapons for close-quarters combat. The elegant beam weapons designed for precise, civilized warfare were adapted to fire rapid bursts of cutting energy, crude but effective in narrow tunnels. The first test came sooner than expected. A Devourer assault unit broke through the outer defenses and entered the main cavern system. 6 spider-like machines, each the size of a small building, followed by dozens of smaller hunter-killer units. Under traditional tactics, the Zephyrian forces would have met them at a prepared defensive position. Shields locked, weapons charged, ranks steady. They would have fought bravely and been systematically destroyed. Instead, the caverns erupted into chaos. Crystal formations collapsed without warning, crushing Devourer units in narrow passages. Energy beams lanced out from hidden positions, then vanished before return fire could be directed. Human Marines emerged from side tunnels to attack with explosive charges, then melted back into the maze of passages before the enemy could respond. The Devourers, programmed for systematic advance and overwhelming firepower, found themselves fighting an enemy that refused to stand still and die properly. Their sensors detected movement everywhere but could pinpoint nothing. Their tactical computers registered continuous contact but could predict no patterns. In one memorable encounter, Private First Class Rodriguez and a young Zephyrian named Koleth trapped 3 hunter-killers in a dead-end passage. Instead of fighting, they used Zephyrian crystal song to create a harmonic resonance that shattered the cave ceiling. The falling rocks destroyed the machines, but more importantly, the sound echoed through the entire cavern system, a sound that said the planet itself was fighting back. The Devourer advance slowed, then stopped completely. For the first time in their recorded history, the machine seemed uncertain. Commander Vexel found himself fighting alongside Sergeant Major Williams in a crystal chamber that had once been a sacred meditation space. Williams moved through the tunnels like a ghost, appearing to strike at exposed sensors and vanishing before the Devourers could target him. "This is insane," Vexil gasped as they regrouped behind a cluster of singing crystals. "Yes, sir," Williams agreed cheerfully, checking his ammunition. "Completely insane. That's why it's working." Above them, the crystal formations began to glow with renewed light, a sign that the planet's natural systems were stabilizing now that the surface mining had stopped. The humans had bought them time, but Vexil knew this was only the beginning. The real war was about to start. The war in the crystal caverns had been raging for 6 days when Cathara first saw a human die. She was leading a group of civilian refugees through the deeper tunnels when the attack came. A Devourer hunter squad had broken through the defensive perimeter and was systematically hunting down evacuees. The machines moved with terrifying efficiency, their scanners sweeping every hiding place, their weapons charging with the distinctive whine that had become the sound of death on Lumina Prime. Sergeant Maria Santos appeared from nowhere, her dark uniform blending with the shadows between the crystal formations. She carried one of the primitive human weapons, a chunky device that fired metal projectiles with explosive chemical charges, barbaric by galactic standards but effective in the confined spaces of the tunnels. "Get the civilians back," Santos ordered Cathara in broken Zephyrian. The humans had been learning their language through combat, picking up words between firefights and explosions. Cathara herded 15 young Zephyrians deeper into the caverns as Santos opened fire on the approaching Devourers. The sound was deafening in the enclosed space. Not the clean hum of energy weapons, but the brutal roar of chemical explosives propelling metal through the air. The first hunter-killer went down with sparks flying from its damaged sensors. The second turned its attention to Santos, energy beams scoring the crystal walls around her position. She rolled behind a formation, came up firing, and put 3 rounds into the machine's central processor. But there were more coming, always more. Cathara watched from the tunnel entrance as Santos fought a running battle through the crystal garden. The human woman moved like nothing Cathara had ever seen, not with the graceful harmony of Zephyrian combat forms, but with a brutal efficiency that seemed born from desperation and determination. When Santos's weapon ran empty, she drew a smaller sidearm. When that too was exhausted, she pulled out what appeared to be an explosive device with a simple timer mechanism. A Devourer spider machine rounded the corner, its multiple weapon arms swiveling toward the huddled Zephyrian children. Santos looked at the explosive in her hand, then at the younglings behind her. Cathara understood what was about to happen. "No!" she called out, but Santos was already moving. The human woman didn't throw the explosive at the enemy machine. Instead, she activated it and dove toward a critical support pillar that held up this section of the cavern roof. The explosion brought down tons of crystal and stone, sealing the passage completely. The children were safe. The Devourers were blocked, and Maria Santos was buried beneath a mountain of debris. Cathara knelt beside the rubble, her crystal body resonating with grief and confusion. Why had the human done this? Santos could have thrown the explosive at the enemy, taken them with her in a glorious death. Instead, she had chosen to sacrifice herself just to save a few alien children she had never met before this war began. Because that's what humans do. Cathara looked up to find Dr. Elizabeth Hawkins standing nearby, her medical kit in hand, though there was clearly nothing to be done for Santos. "I don't understand," Cathara said. Dr. Hawkins sat down beside her, suddenly looking very tired. "Neither do we, most of the time. We just do what needs to be done, even when it doesn't make sense." The battle in the caverns had changed both species in ways neither had expected. The Zephyrians learned to fight dirty, to use improvised weapons and ambush tactics. They discovered they could modulate their crystal song to interfere with Devourer communications, turning their most peaceful art into a weapon of war. The humans, meanwhile, began to understand Zephyrian technology in ways that amazed even the aliens themselves. Private Jenkins figured out how to jury-rig crystal energy cells to power human weapons. Corporal Martinez learned to sing to the crystals in a crude approximation of Zephyrian techniques, coaxing light and power from formations that should have been dormant. But it was the partnership between Commander Vexel and Sergeant Major Williams that truly began. to turn the tide. Williams had been teaching Zephyrian soldiers human combat techniques when he noticed something unusual about their crystal formations. "Commander," he said one day, pointing to a cluster of resonating stones, "your crystals aren't just energy sources, are they?" "They're network nodes," Vexel nodded. "The crystals communicate with each other through harmonic resonance. It's how we've always shared information across great distances." Williams grinned with the expression Vexel had learned meant the human was about to suggest something both brilliant and terrifying. What if we could use that network against the Devourers? The plan they developed was unprecedented. Instead of fighting the invaders directly, they would use the planet's own crystal network to coordinate attacks across the entire cavern system. Zephyrian crystal singers would position themselves at key nodes, using their abilities to relay tactical information instantaneously across hundreds of miles of tunnels. It worked better than anyone had hoped. Devourer forces found themselves facing perfectly coordinated attacks from multiple directions. When they adapted to counter one threat, another would emerge from an unexpected angle. The machine's advantage in processing power and tactical analysis became irrelevant when their enemies could communicate and coordinate faster than electronic signals could travel. But the Devourers adapted too. They began targeting the crystal formations themselves, trying to disrupt the network that was causing them so much trouble. This led to desperate battles in the heart of Lumina Prime's crystal caves, where Zephyrian civilians fought alongside human marines to protect formations that had been sacred for millennia. Kethara found herself in one such battle, standing in the chamber of First Song, where Zephyrian children traditionally learned their crystal craft. Devourer infiltrators had penetrated this deep into the cavern system, seeking to destroy the massive crystal formation that served as the network's primary hub. She fought with a modified energy weapon, one that Dr. Hawkins had helped her adapt for rapid fire. Beside her stood Corporal Zhang, a quiet human woman who had learned enough Zephyrian to sing simple harmonies with the crystals. "Ambassador," Zhang said during a brief lull in the fighting, "why do your people keep apologizing?" Kethara paused in recharging her weapon. "Apologizing? For fighting like humans, for using guerrilla tactics, for doing what it takes to survive." Zhang checked her ammunition count. "You saved my life yesterday with that ambush. Then you apologized for being uncivilized, because it goes against everything we believe," Kethara said. "We are a peaceful people. This kind of warfare, it changes us into something we never wanted to be." Zhang was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Maybe. Or maybe it shows you something you always were but never needed to be." Before Kethara could ask what she meant, the Devourers launched another assault on the chamber. This time they came in overwhelming numbers, dozens of spider machines and hunter-killers pouring through every entrance. The defenders were outnumbered 10-1. Under any conventional military doctrine, they should have retreated or surrendered. Instead, Kethara found herself doing something her people had never done in their entire history. She began to sing a war song. It wasn't in any Zephyrian tradition. It was something new, born from 6 days of fighting alongside humans who never gave up, never retreated, never stopped believing they could win against impossible odds. The crystal formations responded to her voice, glowing brighter and resonating with harmonics that interfered with Devourer targeting systems. Other Zephyrians joined the song. Then the humans added their own voices. Not crystal song, but the raw, defiant battle cries of a species that had never learned when to quit. The sound echoed through every tunnel in the cavern system. Every Devourer machine on the planet suddenly found their sensors overwhelmed by harmonic interference. Their coordination systems failed. Their tactical networks went silent. For the first time since the invasion began, the Devourers were truly blind. It was then that Admiral Chen's voice came over the communication system. "All units. This is Admiral Chen. The Devourer fleet is pulling back to regroup. We have a window. Execute Operation Harmony." Operation Harmony was the most desperate gambit of the entire war. Instead of waiting for the Devourers to regroup and adapt, the combined human Zephyrian forces would attack every Devourer position simultaneously, using the crystal network to coordinate a planet-wide assault. It was insane. It was impossible. It violated every principle of military strategy. It was exactly the kind of plan that might just work. The final battle began with song. Across the crystal caverns of Lumina Prime, thousands of voices rose in harmony. Zephyrian crystal singers weaving their ancient melodies with human battle hymns, creating something that had never existed before. The planet's crystal network amplified their combined song until it resonated through every tunnel, every chamber, every hidden passage where the war had been fought. Admiral Sarah Chen stood in the primary command chamber, watching tactical displays that showed friendly forces throughout the cavern system. After 8 days of guerrilla warfare, her fleet had been reduced to 12 operational ships. Of the 2,000 human Marines who had landed on Lumina Prime, fewer than 800 remained combat effective. But they had accomplished something no military strategist would have thought possible. The Devourer invasion force, which had systematically conquered dozens of worlds, was in full retreat. "Admiral," reported Commander Torres from orbit, "the Devourer fleet is pulling back to minimum safe distance. Their ground forces are attempting to withdraw to extraction points, but our harassment operations are disrupting their retreat." Sarah nodded grimly. The past week had cost both species dearly, but it had forged them into something unprecedented. A fighting force that combined Zephyrian harmony with human stubbornness, alien technology with primitive determination. Commander Vexil approached, his crystal body bearing the scars of countless battles. Beside him walked Sergeant Major Williams, who limped from a wound taken defending a group of Zephyrian younglings. "The crystal network is stable," Vexil reported. "Our singers are in position throughout the system. We can coordinate simultaneous strikes across the entire planet." Williams checked his weapons one final time. "Ma'am, the boys and girls are ready. Zephyrians too. They've learned a lot about fighting dirty in the past week." Sarah looked at the tactical display one more time. Operation Harmony called for every human and Zephyrian soldier to attack their local Devourer positions at exactly the same moment. The enemy would face coordinated assaults from hundreds of different directions simultaneously, making it impossible for their tactical computers to prioritize threats or coordinate responses. It was the kind of plan that could only work once. If it failed, there would be no reserves, no fallback position, no second chance. "All units," Sarah broadcast across the crystal network. "This is Admiral Chen. In 60 seconds, we end this war. Fight for your homes. Fight for your families. Fight for every species in this galaxy that's too afraid to fight for themselves." She paused, then added, "And remember, we came here to save these people, and that's exactly what we're going to do." The countdown reached 0 across Lumina Prime. Crystal formations erupted with light as Zephyrian singers channeled energy through the planetary network. Human explosive charges detonated in perfect synchronization, bringing down tunnel ceilings on Devourer positions. Modified energy weapons fired coordinated volleys that overwhelmed enemy defensive systems. In the Chamber of First Song, Cathara led a charge against the last Devourer stronghold in the sacred caverns. Beside her ran Corporal Zhang and a dozen Zephyrian warriors, who had learned that sometimes peace could only be preserved through war. The battle was brief but savage. Devourer machines, cut off from their command network by crystal song interference, fought with mechanical desperation. But they faced enemies who had learned to fight like humans, with improvised weapons, impossible tactics, and a refusal to acknowledge when they should be defeated. When the last machine fell, Cathara found herself standing in the ruins of her people's most sacred space, surrounded by human soldiers and Zephyrian warriors who had somehow become a single fighting force. Above ground, the Devourer fleet was in full retreat. The harvester ships that had been systematically stripping the planet's surface abandoned their operations and fled toward deep space. For the first time in their recorded history, the Devourers had been forced to abandon a conquest. The cost had been terrible. Nearly half the human fleet was destroyed or crippled. Thousands of Zephyrian soldiers had died defending their world. The crystal formations that powered their civilization would take decades to fully regenerate. But Lumina Prime still existed. The Zephyrian people had survived, and the galaxy had learned something it had never known before, that sometimes the species everyone considered primitive might be the ones willing to do what was necessary. Admiral Chen met with Ambassador Cathara in the ruins of the capital city. The crystal spires were broken, the harmonic gardens were scarred with weapons fire, but the planet's heart still beat with the soft glow of living crystal. Your people saved us, Cathara said simply. When the entire galaxy abandoned us to die, humans chose to stand with us. Sarah was quiet for a long moment, looking out at the devastation that surrounded them. We lost a lot of good people here. Santos, Kowalski, Liu Davidson, they all died for a world they'd never seen before, for people they'd never met. Why? Cathara asked. Why did they do it? Why did any of you do it? Sarah smiled sadly. Because someone had to. Because it was right. And because when you're facing extinction, you deserve to know that somewhere in this cold universe, someone gives a damn about whether you live or die. The aftermath of the Battle of Lumina Prime sent shockwaves throughout the galaxy. The Galactic Council, faced with evidence that a primitive species had succeeded where all the major powers had failed, was forced to reconsider humanity's status. The Altarian Empire, which had dismissed the humans as irrelevant, suddenly found themselves very interested in establishing diplomatic relations. The Vorthak Collective began studying human military tactics with newfound respect. Even the logical Nixari Federation updated their probability matrices to account for the human variable in future calculations. But the most significant change was in the relationship between humans and Zephyrians. The two species had been forged together in the crystal caverns, learning from each other in ways that transformed both civilizations. Zephyrians discovered that their peaceful nature didn't make them weak. It made their willingness to fight when necessary all the more powerful. They learned that harmony could be found not just in crystal song, but in the bonds forged between warriors who trusted each other with their lives. Humans, meanwhile, gained access to technologies and perspectives that expanded their understanding of the universe. But more importantly, they learned that their greatest strength wasn't their weapons or their tactics. It was their willingness to stand up for others, even when everyone else walked away. The formal ceremony took place 6 months later in the rebuilt Hall of Harmony, where Zephyrian crystal singers had gathered for millennia to share their most important songs. Representatives from across the galaxy attended, as Ambassador Cathara presented Admiral Chen with the Crystal of Eternal Harmony, the highest honor her people could bestow. This crystal, Cathara announced, will sing forever with the memory of those who chose to stand with us when we faced the darkness alone. It will remind all who hear it that courage is not the absence of fear, but the decision to act despite fear, and it will carry across the stars the song we learned from humanity, that no species should face extinction without knowing that someone cares. The crystal began to glow, resonating with a harmony that combined Zephyrian melodic traditions with the raw power of human determination. The song it sang was unlike anything heard before in the galaxy, a melody of hope rising from despair, of unity forged in battle, of the choice to help others even when the cost seems too high to bear. Admiral Chen accepted the crystal with hands that still bore scars from the fighting in the caverns. "We came here to save you," she said. "But I think you saved us too. You reminded us that our purpose isn't just to survive, it's to make sure others can survive too." As the ceremony concluded and the gathered representatives began to disperse, the crystal's song continued to resonate through the hall. It would sing for generations to come, carrying a message across the galaxy, that when darkness falls and all hope seems lost, there will always be those willing to stand up and say, "Not today, not while we still breathe." The galaxy was a larger, more dangerous place than anyone had imagined. But it was also a place where courage could triumph over overwhelming odds, where friendship could bridge any gap between species, and where sometimes the smallest act of defiance could echo across the stars. The Zephyrians had cried for aid, and only humans had chosen to answer. But in doing so, they had all learned something precious about what it truly meant to be alive in an infinite universe, that the bonds we forge with others, the choices we make to help instead of looking away, are what give meaning to existence itself. The crystal sang on, and across the galaxy, those who heard it remembered that they were not alone.